In today's video, we're going to be recapping last night's playoff action and taking a look ahead tonight. Can the Leafs close out the Lightning? Plus, can teams like the Winnipeg Jets survive? Who will break the tie? And the Devils or Rangers? Plus, we have some substantial trade rumors regarding the Calgary Flames. According to NHL insiders, many players, even ones under contract, do not want to play for Daryl Sutter and may be requesting trades. We'll discuss the details of that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of things to talk about today. I want to start with some playoff recaps and previewing tonight's action, and we'll jump into some trade talk regarding Calgary here in a few moments' time. Obviously, tonight we have some pivotal games. We have the Toronto Maple Leafs to the Tampa Bay Lightning in Game 5. Obviously, the Leafs are up 3-1. I think you can make an argument that Toronto, as much as they necessarily have not been the better team for the bulk of the last two games, they've found ways to win. They've dug deep, and they've gotten some overtime and other ways to find ways to win here. Like they've come up big and when it mattered most. But like I said, I think Tampa, for the most part at least, has outplayed them. They split the first two games. Each team had their turn thumping the other one. But the last two games, I think Tampa was the better team for probably at least 4 of the 6 periods, maybe 4.5. But at the end of the day, Vasilevsky's been normal. Instead of the playoff Vasilevsky that we've been used to, that's been unfloppable. He's lost 3 strict consecutive games now, which is not what we were expecting. And I don't think that's ever happened to him before. The Maple Leafs have decided that even though Michael Bunting is able to return from suspension, he is not getting into the lineup today. At least that's what we're told so far by head coach Sheldon Keefe. They're not changing the lineup. They've won 3 consecutive games, and they want to remain with the players that have gotten them there. Now, I do understand the concept there. I know there are some who are convinced this is not a good idea, that Bunting is a fairly big upgrade over a few players, at least in the lineup. Like, if you talk about who would come out, you're probably looking at Lafferty or Aston Reese would be your most likely candidates. The coach has made it clear Matthew Nyes has played well enough that he doesn't deserve to come out. And I can see his argument there. Nyes has been good. He's not really getting much in the way of goals or many points, but he's been solid. He's making good plays, smart plays, right plays, offensively and defensively, and certainly wouldn't be the first name to come to mind to draw out a lineup that we could say for certainty. Looks like he's got, a player there who's not really, even though he's new to the league, he doesn't seem to be fazed by the situation, which is good. So we'll see. I think the big thing for Tampa, Vasilevsky, I think, it does not have as good of a defense in front of him as he did for the longest stretch there. I mean, over the last couple of years, they've slowly been depleted in Tampa, and I just think they're just not as deep as they used to be, and the defense isn't as good, which is kind of making Vasilevsky's job harder, which essentially is making him look a little bit more average or normal. I mean, he's having a below-average series, and Samsonov has been outplaying him, and we'll see. I have no doubt, though, tonight, the Leafs are going to want to wrap things up in Game 5 at home if they can, but Tampa's going to throw everything at them. This team is not one I bet against. I think they're going to go down with a strong fight tonight, and it wouldn't be shocking at all if Tampa forces the series to keep going, go a little bit longer to at least Game 6. But right now, things do look very favorable for the Leafs to win the series. Whether or not that's tonight will have to remain to be seen. We also have the Game 5 between New Jersey and the New York Rangers. Of course, the Rangers won the first 2. The Devils have won the last 2. We'll see if the road team continues to be victorious or not. Certainly, the Rangers haven't been pleased with the efforts of some of their veteran players in the more recent games. And Kira Schmid has been phenomenal for the Devils. But I think it's fair to say Igor Shesterkin has more than done his job for the Rangers as well. So it could be a goalie battle. I don't expect a lot of goals, but that's going to be a pivotal game. Now, whoever wins tonight obviously is going to have 2 cracks at eliminating the other one in Game 6, possibly Game 7. So we'll see. It could be very interesting. Well, the veterans like Zibanejad and Patrick Kane or Temi Panarin break through and come through with a big effort tonight to get the Rangers back on top, or will the young upstart Devils continue to roll here and pull forward? We'll find out. And the Jets can be eliminated tonight by the Vegas Golden Knights. They're really depleted, on the roster with Josh Morrissey being out. He's done for the series for sure. They obviously have not had Cole Perfetti all series, and Scheifele is out as well. Scheifele is with the team as they are in Vegas for Game 5, but he is not going to be able to play. He's not been ruled out for Game 6, so they're still holding that as a possibility should they continue to, the win here and force the series to continue on. But Winnipeg is I don't know. Hellbuck's underperforming, and they're depleted with injuries. I just don't think the odds are good. They might be able to pull one out here and extend the series. It would not be a shocker, but I think the odds are very much in favor of Vegas carrying on and going to the next round. We'll see if that happens tonight, or if Winnipeg can stay alive. We've yet to see any teams be eliminated, and any teams facing elimination so far in the playoffs have been able to stave things off and continue it on, including last night when we saw the Florida Panthers face elimination for the first time and beat the Boston Bruins 4-3 in overtime to continue that series and push it to at least 6 games. Of course, Game 6 now will go in Florida after the Game 5 was last night in Boston. Sergei Bobrovsky went into net for the Panthers last night. It was really, really good. A lot of people thought maybe Alex Lyon would go because he's played the bulk of the games recently, and for the most part was really good. But Paul Maurice cited the fact that Bobrovsky is, the more experienced goalie there for the high-pressure situations, and thought he was the better choice. And he proved right with that call. For not any, putting up an easy task for him at all. They put up 47 shots on goal, and he weathered the storm, including a major, big-time save off Brad Marchand in the dying seconds of regulation of the tie game. Marchand puts that in. It's game over, series over. Instead, it goes to overtime. Of course, the Panthers, though, I must say, they came out, they scored the first goal, and they kept responding every time Boston tied it up. So Boston never led in this game. We had Florida, Boston, Florida, Boston, Florida, Boston, and then Florida in overtime. And like I said, the overtime goal was a goalie gaff. Linus Ullmark, who's normally a good puck mover and puck handler, goes to behind the net to play the puck, and instead of going against with the flow and trying to bring it up around the boards, which is what you would expect him to do in that scenario, he decides to do a reverse, causes a turnover, ends up right out front of Matthew Tkachuk, who was patient, waited Ullmark out, and boom, into that game over. Just like that. And of course, of all guys, you don't want to end up on the stick of Matthew Tkachuk, who's going to bury that most of the time. So certainly, a play from Allmark that's uncharacteristic. There was also a big giveaway earlier in the game from Tyler Bertuzzi as well. Again, just a couple of plays from the Bruins that you just haven't really seen this year. This team has been so sound that you don't really see them making big, glaring mistakes, and to have multiple in one game was surprising. Bergeron made his return. He was really good as well for the Bruins. Pasternak's, you can't really call it a slump because overall, if you look at his numbers, they're still good, but he has been a little quieter the past couple of games, and I think they could certainly use him to kind of wake things up and get back on the score sheet here in Game 6 to kind of hopefully wrap things up rather than have Florida push it to 7. And the Kraken surprised the Avalanche. Are now up 3-2 in the series. They won the game last night 3-2. Philip Grubauer continues to really shut down his old team. Has been outstanding. Certainly a story that's not getting a lot of attention is Grubauer's performance. Since he's been in Seattle, his regular season play has been subpar both years. The Kraken, even though they were a 100-point team and got in the playoffs for the first time this year, my big concern with them was goaltending. Goaltending this year, not very good. They continue to win games because of their high-power offense, which is by committee. Outside of Jared McCann, who's a 40-goal guy, their next highest goal scorer has 24. That's quite a drop-off. And without McCann in the lineup last night, I thought the Avalanche might be able to pull ahead. But no, the Kraken continue to defy the odds and beat this team. McKinnon became a little bit of a I guess you could say he lost his composure, complained a lot to the refs, which it was a big part of the second Kraken goal. Instead of hustling back or getting to the bench for a change and hustling, instead he's yelling at the refs, and which caused the player to be out of position and gave the Kraken their opening, and boom, it's into that. They ended up with a 3-1 lead off a goal from Yanni Gourde early in the third. Evan Rodriguez scored with, I think, 3 or 4 minutes to go, make it 3-2. The Avalanche did have a pretty strong push at the end with the goalie out to try to tie things up, but it just could not get the puck in the net. And the Kraken held on for a 3-2 win and take a 3-2 series lead. So now the Avalanche need to win 2 consecutive games. At least Cale Makar will be back in the lineup in Game 6 after serving his 1-game suspension. So between Makar, who certainly let his team down by making a big mistake with that hit, and then McKinnon certainly made a big mistake last night. McKinnon also scored a goal. It's not like he's played poorly. He hasn't, but still, that lack of composure mistake did cost his team. I would suspect those 2 guys will come out as strong as ever in Game 6 and trying to force things to Game 7 where they have a chance to win it at home. If they do survive this round, though, you do have to be concerned with the longevity that this team can keep going, considering how depleted they are. The Avalanche are just not as deep and not as powerful as they were last year. Now, we also saw an interesting signing today in Washington on a Swedish defenseman that was garnering a fair bit of NHL attention. They've signed defenseman Hardy Haman Aktel. Obviously, he, like I said, he's a Swedish defenseman. It's a 1-year, 2-way deal, nothing major. $775 to $82.50 in the AHL. So just your very standard league minimum 1-year, 2-way contract. But this guy comes with a lot of potential. Now, we've seen this happen before. They don't always work out. But he's 24 years old. Had a real solid year this year in the SHL for the Lakers. Put up 36 points in 51 games. He's got good size, 6'3", 220. Good offensive puck-moving defenseman. And there was a lot of interest in this guy. He was a draft pick of the Nashville Predators back in 2016, but obviously opted to stay in Europe and not come over, never signed with Nashville, and now he's an unrestricted free agent. So, we've seen this before. The Leafs brought over a real promising defenseman here from Finland a couple of years back. He didn't end up working out to anything and is already, 1 year out of the league. So it doesn't always amount to something, but with that kind of contract, it's certainly low risk with potential high reward. Considering the changes we've seen in Washington and the turnover there, I suspect he'll get every opportunity to make the roster in a training camp and get some games in to see how things work out. But certainly an interesting one there for sure. Now, on to the big news out of the Calgary Flames organization. I've seen multiple reports from NHL insiders, the latest one from Darren Dreger, talking on different interviews, saying how the Calgary Flames could be facing a situation where they have multiple players that basically want out, or at least they want out under the existing structure conditions of that team. Now, what that means is that they don't want to play for Coach Daryl Sutter any longer. I mean, that's not a huge shock. We heard a lot of these reports near the end of the season. We heard of these reports immediately after the regular season ended, once, there were locker cleanout and all that. And if you take a look at the season-ending interviews, the last mini availability from similar players, it's pretty obvious to me who some of these guys are, based on their, hesitant responses and words chosen carefully and all that. It's no big surprise that Sutter can be difficult for sure to work for. We've seen this season be very, odd in how he went about things. I think that, to me, it certainly was pretty evident that there was a bit of a rift, or a case of him and GM Brad Treliving not seeing eye to eye on different roster spots and decisions. And I think there were times when Treliving was wanting him to play the younger players more. They'd bring him up from the minors, and he would kind of dig his heels in and just not play them. I mean, they've seen cases of guys like Phillips, Pelche, etc. They'd come up, and they would have to wait forever to get into the lineup. Like, what's the point of having them there if they're not going to play? They could be continuing to play and helping their AHL team. Some players didn't know when they were going to make their debuts, so they could make arrangements for family to come in. He wouldn't even tell them when they were playing. He was just really, really difficult, which really is not shocking. That's typical Daryl Sutter. He is very stubborn, from what we can see. And when he doesn't agree with your decisions, he'll fight you tooth and nail, because that's just the way he's made. That's just in his DNA. But at the end of the day, Brad Treliving is no longer the general manager in Calgary. And it's not because he was fired. The team, I think, sounded like they were quite happy to re-sign him and keep him on. But the contract extension was not accepted. They decided to wait till the end of the year, and Brad Treliving has decided that he is leaving the organization. So right now, they have Don Maloney, who is essentially the interim GM and the president of hockey ops. And he's tasked with the role of almost leading the hockey ops department for right now and finding the next general manager. Now, a lot of people speculate that there's a good chance that it could be an internal candidate in Craig Conroy, longtime former NHL player, longtime NHL assistant GM, well-respected within the Flames organization. He's worked there a long time. Not only has he's worked there as in management, played there, and certainly seems like a really good choice, someone who would already kind of know the roster. To me, if they were willing to keep Treliving on, it doesn't sound like the ownership really felt like they needed massive change and a new direction and all that. So clearly, as a case of, going internal does make some sense, right? Now, I think at the end of the day, Treliving is reported, based on what we've heard between Elliot Friedman and Frank Saravelli, that he just could not work with Daryl Sutter anymore. And where Sutter has a contract for a couple more years and he doesn't, it was basically a scenario where he had no choice but to walk away. if he didn't want to work with them. Ownership doesn't seem at this point, at least, that they're really willing to make the change behind the bench. I mean, it would be a lot of money wasted, essentially, if he is fired from his position. It's believed he's got 2 years on his contract at around $4 million a year. So it's $8 million that they would pay him over this year and next to not work for them, which is, yes, it's a big loss for sure. But at the same time, do you want to have another wasted season and your team underperform? Now, it doesn't mean that that's necessarily going to happen, but when you have that many players that are not really wanting to work with that coach, it does create some locker room issues, and it really, and it can be quite detrimental to the team. So at the end of the day, when Darren Dreger is going on the record and saying that multiple Flames players, even including not only ones that are expiring contracts that can freely leave on their own, but players that are under contract, and most of the players they seem to be talking about are players that don't have a lot of term left on their contract, because this is kind of based on what they've been digging up behind the scenes, as well as comments made in their season-ending media availability. For example, Elias Lindholm certainly seemed extremely reluctant when he was asked about re-signing, because he's entering the final year of his deal, so he would be eligible for a new contract extension. It wasn't more than a season ago that he was part of hockey's top line with Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk. Of course, they're both gone. His number suffered this year because of it, but he's still a really good center. He's only 28 years old. His cap hit for next year is only $4.85 million. Doesn't have a trade clause of any kind in his contract, so you can move him anywhere without restrictions and having to get him to agree. He's a solid top six center, no matter how you shake it. 2 years back, he was a 40-plus goal scorer. He's come close to 30 goals multiple times before that. This guy is, a real solid player. And it would not surprise me if he has the right line mates and the right playing situation. He could return to being a 75 to 80 point player next year. To me, he is value based on what he can provide, his age, his contract, and the fact that a team could, basically get him kind of as their own rental for the year. If it's working out, they can extend him. I think this guy's value would be extremely high for trades. The free agent market this year is looking extremely thin. So I think the trade market leading into the summer and the bulk of the time when we see the busiest activity is going to be extremely volatile and busy. I think we're going to see a lot more trades because of the lack of options on the free agent market. And this is a prime player that teams are going to be looking towards. If the Flames really feel like they need to move him because he doesn't want to stay in Calgary, then personally, I don't see any issues in doing that. They can get a good return for this guy. Another guy is Michael Backlund. Of course, a long-time, lifelong Calgary Flame, 34 now, also in the final year of his deal. His cap hits only 5.35, a real solid two-way center. It can be a number 2 or a number 3, depending on the team. Put up 50-plus points. Again, he hasn't modified non-trade, so there's a little bit of restriction on where you could trade him. But, of course, he seemed very reluctant as well in the end-of-season media availability, talking that, about re-signing, and he just really wants to win. He's really had to take some time to think and evaluate and all that, like your common answer. So Backlund and Lindholm are the main two players that come to mind when they say that there's multiple players under contract that don't want to play for Sutter. And that's all. Basically, I think they're kind of waiting to see if Sutter's going to be confirmed to be coming back. And I think we're not going to know that 100% until they hire the new general manager. I think that's going to be ultimately their choice to some extent, but I think ownership is going to have an even bigger say in that. Ownership is the one who presented contract extensions to both the coach and the general manager before last season started. Sutter accepted, Tree Living did not. He wanted to wait, and here we are. So obviously it's not entirely on the GM, in my opinion. Normally it would be. I think it's ownership's call, and I think ownership's going to bring him back because they don't want to pay him to not work there. Now, could they talk to him? Talk about maybe making some adjustments and some changes? Sure, that's a possibility. But at the end of the day, I mean, that's going to be challenging for him to do. So Backlund, Lindholm, the main two. Another one that comes to mind, though, is Noah Hanifin, 26 years old, also entering the following year of his deal, a former top 5 pick in the draft, 6'3", 210-pound, mobile defenseman, good puck mover, good skater, had a lot of interest in trades. His name has come up before in recent years, but and of course, there was never a player the Flames were really looking to move, but, generally can count on him for at least 40 points from the back end. And even though he's only 26, he's already played 8 years because he went straight to the NHL after being drafted and has certainly, had a solid career so far. Again, another player entering the final year of his contract, only making under $5 million. This would be a guy as well that would generate a pretty high value. He's a top 4 defenseman for that kind of money with 1 year left, so you can experiment and see, if that's a player who fits with you longer term. I think all 3 of these guys are the main contenders for who their insiders are talking about when it comes to the players that are under contract, don't necessarily want to play under Coach Sutter. I think you could probably throw guys like Jonathan Huberdeau maybe in that conversation as well, but of course he just signed a mega long-term deal. I think trading Huberdeau would be very, very, very complicated. I don't know that's something that they would really want to explore, but I do know it's fair to say there's no doubt that those two certainly had their issues this past year. That was evident in what we've seen on the ice and, interviews and post-game and pre-game scrums during the whole season. Now, another name to watch in Flames trades this year has nothing really to do with Sutter. This one is more of a necessity, and that's backup goalie Denny Vladar. Vladar's still, a guy who's in his mid-20s, got 2 years on his contract at $2.5 million. And was trending at one point towards being one of the better backup goalies in the league. I think he can still be that. The team itself wasn't as good this year. Did affect him. It affected Markstrom as well. But they need to make room for Dustin Wolf. This up-and-coming young goaltender has nothing left to achieve in the American Hockey League. He was the league's MVP, top goalie. He needs to be in the NHL next year. There's no doubt about it. I do not see them moving Jacob Markstrom with that kind of contract and term. And really, I don't know that they'd want to anyway. So, to me, Vladar becomes a victim of circumstance in that regard. I think with his contract and his history of being a decent backup should make him a fairly easy trade target, depending on where he wants to. Of course, he doesn't have any trade protection either, so a pretty easy deal to make, I think, depending on where you send him. But another guy to watch for in Flames trades. So let me know your thoughts on the Calgary Flames. How is this going to end? Will Sutter be back? Will some of these players end up requesting trades? Because it doesn't look like Sutter's going to be the odd man out here. What is going to happen? Will they have to blow things up? Will we see massive change in Calgary? Let me know down in the comments. We'll talk about it further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.